Hey everybody, back again, another video. And so what you're looking at is the wing of the so the P-47 project ongoing, working on the wing. You'll see that it's all buttoned up. All the last remaining infill pieces are infilled. So the wing is completely sealed, right? So here's the thing. So I got ahead of myself again, and I was looking at the method for unitizing the flap activity. Press one down, they both go down. Lift one, they both go up. So they're tied through the piano wire length that goes through the center of the wing section, and then is glued in behind this infill piece on each side. So I was looking at that, and I went ahead and was fitting it, and I just, you know, got ahead of it and went ahead and glued them up, thinking I don't need to pop those flaps out of there anymore. But you know, I did still need to be able to do that. Now I can't. And I thought about cutting it, cutting that length of piano wire, trying to pull it all apart, start over with the with that center wing center section hinge idea. But I decided instead just to make do. You know, make do. That's what you got to do sometimes. Just forge on. So that's what we're doing. So the flaps are a little tight. They will work together. Unfortunately, by buttoning it up ahead of schedule here, it means I won't be able to clean this opening and also to sand these edges of the flaps in here on either side, on both flaps. So that's going to be a much more tedious process. That's going to be, you know, a strip of sandpaper and just kind of meticulously walking it in and out through there. I'll probably use like a 1/2 inch wide strip, and you know, just like it sounds, it's something about this wide, obviously not this coarse, and just kind of work it in and out on both sides here, on those surfaces, to clean them up and whatnot. So there's that. The flaps are now installed. You know, the good news again was I could button up the wing once I had that done. We've got the down lock, machine gun barrel down locks working. We've got a little air traffic as soon as I turn the camera on, so bear with me for a second. Alright, so the machine gun ports here and here are open. I filled in the other two that were initially drilled in too high, and I figured that mark was going to change. I just wanted to see what I was dealing with and what would happen if I had to lower that whole location, that machine gun port location. So, you know, there's a little bit of cleanup to do here. Now I'm also going to have to take care to sand the top edge in here along this surface on each of these flaps. And again, we're probably going to end up doing it the same way, just with a strip of stiff sandpaper. A sanding stick is just a little too thick to get in there very well. So I might find just a strip of 020 styrene, about a 1/2 inch wide, and super glue, you know, some, I don't know, 220 grit sandpaper to it, and then just kind of work that periodically until I get it smooth. The other thing I could do is I could just line that with cardstock, real fine, a thin grade of cardstock. You know, something not much more than maybe the thickness of 2 sheets of paper together. Just a fine, thin cardstock, and just you know, lay it on top of that surface with white glue. Glue that down and make it look clean that way, if I can't get it sanded the way I want to. And all of that again was because I jumped the gun on gluing the flaps into place. So my bad, but we'll, like I said, working around it. And then once I get this stiffness situation worked out, get these a little more flexible, movable in there, they should function in unison. Alright, so what have I done to the surface here? Both sides of the wing, top and bottom, were treated with one coat of the sand and seal. Now this raises the grain and stiffens the fibers of the wood, so that when you sand it, it makes a nice clean edge, nice clean surface. Allows you to take it down. It also seals the wood, hence the name sand and seal, such that it becomes pretty impregnable. You know, I mean, I don't know, not so, I mean, a little bit to water, but you know, to the moisture in the filler, it kind of withstands that, unless the filler sort of hardens a little bit better. Also, if I put the filler on, like this side has been treated, so this side was just brushed with the sand and seal. This surface was brushed first with sand and seal and sanded, and then a layer of the spackle paste was applied overall, and then that was sanded. So what I would do at this point again is go over the whole wing with this stuff, seal it, and what the sand and seal does is on top of the filler that's left behind, on top of the spackle that you see left behind, it really penetrates into that and hardens that a little bit. And the reason I like it for that to happen is that when I'm applying the spackle and then sanding it off, we go way down in sandpaper coarseness. So I start off sanding this with a 60 grit, and then I lay this sand and seal product on it and sand that off with a 120, and then I sand off, lay on, and then sand off the filler, the spackle paste, and I sand that off with 120. And the reason for that is there's no more need for the 60 grit. That's the 60 grit's just to carve the shape. It's to get the leading and trailing edges close to where I want them to be. Not all the way there, because the 120 grit is going to reduce it a little more. I'm not just going to sand off the filler, but I'm still sanding and working on getting down to the tops of these, you know, ribs, wing ribs. Not so much the stringers. The stringers ride a little high, so I'll be sanding into those. But to the tops of the ribs, that gives us, that's where the shape of the wing is supposed to be, along the top of those wing ribs. So that's what I'm looking for when I start sanding into this over the multiple applications of filler. So one application of filler, typically with the wings and the fuselage and any of the surface of the airplane. With the filler, I'm going up to and sometimes exceeding 5 applications of filler, 5 separate applications of filler with a sanding session in between to reduce it, to get it off. And all that should be left behind, where you see this white, is in those low points, those low areas where it needed the filler to get back to shape, where some of the infill pieces were a little bit low for whatever reason. And anywhere that there was a gap, a crease, a crack, you know, something of an imperfection or something of a gap in between, in a corner or an area where it didn't quite, where the infill piece didn't quite fit perfectly. So anyway, that's where you should see the white residue. And on the bottom of this wing, because this is not infill, this is sheeting. The only reason to apply filler to this is to remove the grain. And I don't want any grain, wood grain to show, right? So there will probably only need to be 2 or 3 applications of filler down here, at least as far as the grain is concerned. Now, I am laminating over these openings, the actual landing gear openings, the actual fairings for these openings. And because that's going to be either, you know, 1/32 material, probably 1/32 material, there's going to have to be an application of filler to smooth that and fair that into the underwing surface. In other words, I don't want there to look like there's a fairing over this. I want it to just look smooth. Okay, so you know that's still to come. But as far as just getting rid of the grain down here, not really having a lot of this to clean up or to sand smooth, you can do a little bit less filler application on a sheeted wing than on an infill. Right. So that's where we're at on that. As far as the landing gear legs go, I don't know if I have a previous video like this. I'm still looking to set the depth, so I'm still trying to figure out how much of this deck to sand into to get to a viable standoff distance for the landing gear leg, landing gear door. So you can see the depth of that is pretty significant. A lot of this is going to have to be sanded down yet to get to where that standoff looks reasonable when the landing gear is down. In other words, I don't want the gear doors way out here just so that they'll be flush here. I have to get this reduced to the point where that standoff is right for when the gear is down too. So if that door is just barely standing off from here, in other words, if our landing gear door is in here, you know, that's going to look good. But if I set that here and then the gear retracts and falls that deeply into the opening, that's not good. Now you can see our standoff in there is pretty significant. Now, if we look at this, that would mean the doors would have to stand off from the landing gear leg out here, and that just doesn't look realistic on a P-47 with, you know, the doors out here. They need to be tight, a little tighter. I figured about 1/8 of an inch standoff should look right, and if that's the case, then just 1/8 of an inch in here should look right. Well, that's with the legs straight, not here, but straight, parallel to the wing itself, which means I have, you know, almost an entire layer. So it would be almost to take off this second layer. And I'm not going to do that. Obviously, if the door can be made close and it has to stand off just a little bit more than I'd like. Let's say if it had to stand off here, you know, instead of here, 1/8 of an inch. If it had to stand off here to this distance, I'd be okay with that. But that does mean that, you know, almost the second layer has to, entire secondary layer has to come off, at least here. And it won't look good if it's here and like this. It won't look good in the front view. So this is we're still in a tricky area. You know, still trying to get this mapped out to where it's going to look right, gear up and gear down. And that's leaving aside yet the problem of making sure that as the gear comes in, all of the openings align with all of the doors. That's going to be a trick in itself. You can see the sanding of the profile, trailing edge, the reveal around the wingtip, the reveal here at the front, at the leading edge, and so on, is pretty consistent all the way around. So what that means is, I mean, even if it's not necessarily correct, if I don't remove enough material or if I remove too much, one way or the other, if it's symmetrical, it's going to be a little bit less critical that it be accurate to the full-scale aircraft. I know that if you follow me, accuracy I want, right? But accuracy is you know, it's offset with good symmetry. If there's good symmetry, you know, you can get away with it a little bit. So, and I think the wing already had a fairly thick cord. I think that's called the cord, the thickness of the wing, because it's supposed to be a Guillow scale, but flying or anyway. with the flat bottom airfoil that they'd engineered for the kit. I think they extended or thickened the upper airfoil shape as an offset for that. Otherwise the wing might have looked too skinny. So I'm dealing with a couple of issues in scale here, and I'm just trying to come to a decent concession all the way around to end up with a decent effect. Right, so we closed the gaps up. I talked about this, adding the strip of balsa to the wing at this edge of the opening on both the top and the bottom. You can see that looks doubled up there. You can kind of see that it's been doubled up. And that, you know, it does a couple of things. It prevents the flap from being able to rotate up above flush. It should never be up above flush. And it cleans up and narrows that opening, so there's not so much of the wing edge or wing surface behind that, less revealed, so that's good. Okay, so I'm going to be applying obviously more spackle here. We got to get this smoothed out. There's still a little bit of some low spots, some areas that need attention. Looking at this using light and shadow, if I tilt the wing a certain way to the light, you can kind of pick up on areas, and I'm not sure what angle the camera is compared to my eye, so you may not be seeing some of the stuff that I'm seeing when I do this. But using light and shadow, and then eventually the real tell will be, as I'm getting this paint prepped, will be the initial layer of this surface primer, the gray, or if I use the white surface primer. I think because this has the invasion stripes on the underwing side, I think I'll use the white primer and then mask off for the invasion striping at that point. But either way, the surface primer, that lets me see any imperfections a lot better than trying to picture them on the wood, especially when using light and shadow with that little bit of paint pigment in the surface primer. Okay, so this surface doesn't really matter. I don't care what this looks like. The belly pan is going to cover this. That's the part that's going to have to look smooth. So this can be left rough, but I do have to clean these up, do some reduction in here, get these brought down so that